She said, "I'm keeping the cat in the divorce. You don't even like animals." The cat was my emotional support animal prescribed for my PTSD. I said, "We'll let the court decide." Then I showed the judge my medical documentation and her text messages about getting rid of the stupid cat. When the judge ruled in my favor, I, 34 male, am a combat veteran with diagnosed PTSD from 2 deployments overseas. I have a rescue tabby named Sergeant who is literally prescribed to me by my VA psychiatrist as an emotional support animal. Not figuratively. The guy is in my medical file. He interrupts my panic cycles in a way that 2 different medications couldn't fully replicate, and my psychiatrist has documented that specific response over 2 years of treatment notes. My ex-wife knew all of this before she married me. She married me anyway. For 3 years, I told myself that meant she accepted it. She did not accept it. She tolerated it, which is a completely different thing, and I learned that difference the hard way. She never liked Sergeant. From literally the first week. He sheds everywhere. He smells. "Can't you just take a pill instead of having this animal in our bed?" I explained, more than once, that Sergeant wasn't a lifestyle choice.
He was part of my treatment plan.
She'd nod, seem to understand, and then go back to calling him the stupid cat when she thought I wasn't in earshot. I was always in earshot. The marriage had other problems too. Money disappeared in ways I kept rationalizing. Plans got canceled, always mine, never hers. Friends I had before the marriage slowly stopped being people I saw, partly because she found reasons to dislike all of them. I kept telling myself this was just what adjusting to marriage looked like. Turns out it was just what slow erosion looks like when you're too close to see the pattern. 8 months ago, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with the face people make when they've rehearsed what they're about to say. "I want a divorce." I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I said okay, and I meant it. By that point, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. What I was not prepared for was the next sentence out of her mouth. "And I'm keeping the cat." I went completely still. "What?" "I'm staying in the apartment until the lease ends. The cat stays with me. He is my emotional support animal. He is prescribed. He is registered. He is in my medical records going back 2 years. She actually waved her hand, like I'd said something mildly annoying. "You don't even like animals. You barely pet him. I'm the one who feeds him half the time. He sleeps on my chest when I'm having a night terror. That's not about petting. That's about keeping me functional. You're being dramatic. You can get another cat." That sentence. Right there. That sentence told me everything I needed to know about how she had understood our entire marriage. I looked at her for a long moment and said, very quietly, "We'll let the court decide." She had not expected that. She'd expected me to fold, because I'd folded on a lot of things over 3 years. The apartment we chose, the vacations we took, the friends I gradually stopped seeing. I'd compromised so many times she'd forgotten I was capable of not compromising. She didn't know that underneath everything, I was still someone who had made hard calls under pressure. She'd just made a serious miscalculation. I filed the next morning, not just divorce paperwork, but a specific legal motion for possession of Sergeant, documented as a prescribed emotional support animal under my active PTSD treatment plan. My attorney flagged immediately that this was strong ground. Under federal law, ESAs prescribed for documented disabilities carry real legal weight, especially when the documentation is detailed and longitudinal. My VA psychiatrist's letter, the 2 years of treatment notes, the specific documented mechanism of how Sergeant interrupted my panic response. It was all there. My attorney called it a paper fortress. That was a good description. He also told me to save every single communication with her going forward. Screenshot everything. That advice ended up being the most important thing anyone said to me during this entire process. Because she started texting. The first one came 3 days after I filed. "This is ridiculous. Drop the cat thing, and we can settle everything quietly. Don't make this ugly." I screenshot it, said nothing, let my attorney handle all formal communication. Then she escalated. She called my mother, who she'd never particularly liked, and told her I was using PTSD as an excuse to be difficult in the divorce. My mother called me immediately, repeated the whole conversation, and asked if she could testify, if it came to that. I saved the voicemail. Then she called my landlord and tried to get me removed from the lease early, claiming I'd abandoned the residence. My attorney sent a letter within 24 hours. That went nowhere. Then she reached out to mutual friends, people who had been at our wedding, and apparently told them Sargent was just a regular cat, and that I was weaponizing mental illness to win a custody battle over a pet. Several of those people messaged me, clearly prompted by her, saying things like, "Don't you think this is a bit extreme? She loves that cat too." She did not love that cat. She had called him the stupid cat for 3 years. And here is where her confidence became her complete undoing, because she kept texting me directly. Not through attorneys. Directly to my phone. Over about 2 weeks. Honestly thinking about taking him to a shelter if you keep dragging this out. Just so you know. 3 days later. My friend said ESA letters are basically useless in court. You're wasting money on this. Then, the one that ended her case before we even got to the courtroom. I don't even want the stupid cat. I just don't want you to have him. Figure that out. I read that one twice. Then I forwarded it to my attorney with one line. Is this what I think it is? He called me within the hour. This is someone telling the court she doesn't want the animal. She wants to deprive you of your medical support out of spite. Yeah, this is exactly what you think it is. We went to mediation first as is standard. She showed up with her attorney and the energy of someone who had never lost an argument in her life. She had Sargent listed under personal property in her settlement proposal. Like, he was a piece of furniture. Her attorney made the argument that since the cat had been living in the apartment, her current residence, he'd become acclimated there and relocating him would be disruptive to the animal. My attorney placed my VA psychiatric file, the ESA prescription letter, 2 years of treatment notes, and a printed copy of every text message on the table in a single neat stack. Her attorney looked at that stack, then looked at her. She was staring at the printouts with an expression I will not forget. Mediation collapsed. We went in front of a judge. Now I want to be clear about something because I've seen people get this wrong online. In most states, pets are legally classified as property in divorce proceedings. That is the baseline. But there is an important distinction that my attorney understood and her attorney underestimated. When an animal is a documented medical support tool, which is functionally what a properly prescribed ESA is, the analysis shifts. The question stops being purely, who owns the property, and becomes, does transferring this property constitute a harm to a person's documented medical treatment? That's a different conversation, and it's one where 2 years of detailed VA records carry enormous weight. We were in front of the judge 6 weeks after mediation failed. Her attorney went first, made the acclamation argument again, pointed out that I traveled occasionally for work and wasn't home every day, suggested, with a genuinely straight face, that I could easily obtain another emotional support animal, and that the bond with a specific animal was not legally distinct from the bond with any animal. My attorney stood up, placed the VA documentation in front of the judge, walked through the treatment notes that named Sargent specifically, not an ESA. This cat, this bond, documented over 2 years by a licensed VA psychiatrist. Then he read the text aloud. The shelter threat. The ESA letters are useless text. And then the last one, slowly and clearly. I don't even want the stupid cat. I just don't want you to have him. Figure that out. The courtroom was very quiet. The judge looked at my ex-wife over her glasses for a long moment. My ex was staring at the table. Counsel, the judge said to her attorney, is your client's position that she wants this animal or that she wants the petitioner not to have this animal? Her attorney leaned over and whispered with her for what felt like a full minute. She has formed an attachment to the animal, Your Honor. The judge looked back at the texts, then back at them. I'm going to need you to do better than that. The ruling came the same day. The judge awarded me full possession of Sargent, citing the documented ESA prescription, the specificity of the therapeutic bond in my medical records, and, she said this out loud on the record, the respondent's own communications, which suggest her interest in the animal is not welfare-based, but is retaliatory in nature. Retaliatory. In the official court record, attached to our divorce proceedings permanently. Her attorney requested a 48-hour window for the handoff. The judge granted it and specified that the transfer had to be facilitated by a neutral third party to ensure compliance. Contempt of court was mentioned if there was any interference. 48 hours later, I stood in the lobby of my old apartment building. My attorney's paralegal was next to me. My ex came down, set Sergeant's carrier on the lobby floor, and walked back to the elevator without making eye contact. Sergeant meowed. I crouched down, unzipped the top of the carrier. He pushed his head through immediately. I picked up the carrier and walked out. That should have been the end of it. It was not the end of it. 2 weeks after I had Sergeant back and settled in my new place, I got a call from my building manager. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint claiming I had an unregistered pet and had falsified my ESA documentation to get around the building's pet policy. Let me be precise about what that accusation is. It's not just a nuisance complaint. Falsifying ESA documentation is a real issue that buildings deal with, and a formal complaint triggers a review process. If my documentation hadn't been airtight, it could have created serious problems. And whoever filed it knew that. This wasn't random. This was targeted. It didn't stay anonymous for long. My attorney submitted a public records request regarding the complaint. The anonymous submission traced back to an email domain registered to my ex-wife's family's small business, her brother's company. She had used his email account to file the complaint, so it couldn't be traced directly to her. This was no longer just a messy divorce. She had now filed a fraudulent complaint with my housing provider, targeting my federally protected disability accommodation after already losing in court. That is a Fair Housing Act issue. Interfering with a person's ESA accommodation, including through fraudulent complaints designed to trigger a housing review, exposes you to significant civil liability under federal law. My attorney sent her attorney a letter the following week. It was precise, and it was not friendly. It outlined the complaint, the traced origin, the Fair Housing Act implications, and the damages my attorney could demonstrate from the disruption to my housing and medical stability. It offered one off-ramp: settle everything on my terms, completely, with no further negotiation. My terms were straightforward. I had entered the marriage with a savings account. Over 3 years, money had moved in ways I had been too trusting about. I itemized what was originally mine, subtracted legitimate joint expenses, and identified personal charges she had run through our joint account that were entirely her own. I wanted that figure. I also wanted my grandmother's 1974 Seiko watch back, which she had listed in the initial property division under jewelry and accessories, like it was something she'd picked up at a department store. She settled every term. The watch came back in a small envelope through her attorney's office. The financial figure was agreed upon. She signed a mutual release of all claims, meaning no appeals, no further complaints, no contact. The fair housing complaint didn't disappear with the settlement, though. Because it had been submitted in writing to my building management and documented by my attorney, it became part of the civil record when we filed the Fair Housing Act notice of claim. We didn't go to full civil trial. The settlement resolved it, but the notice of claim is public record. That proceeding, tied to the business entity that filed the complaint, exists. Background checks on litigation history in certain professional and financial contexts will find it.
She built that.
One text at a time, one anonymous complaint at a time. I didn't manufacture any of it. I just stopped folding and kept every receipt. My attorney's closing words were, "The documentation won this. Not emotion.
Paper."
He was right. And I think about how much of what happened in that marriage I absorbed without documenting, without naming, without treating as the pattern it clearly was. How many times I told myself that defending the things keeping me functional was just a communication issue. The court didn't need my feelings about any of it. It needed the VA file and her own words in her own texts. Feelings are easy to argue against in a courtroom. A VA psychiatrist's detailed treatment notes and someone's own text messages are considerably harder to argue against. If you're in something where you have to constantly defend the things that are keeping you healthy, your medication, your therapy, your support system, pay attention to that. That is not a communication issue. That is information. Sergeant is asleep at the foot of my bed right now. My VA psychiatrist noted at my last appointment that my episode frequency has decreased significantly since I've had stable housing and consistent access to him. She put in the notes. It's in the file. The same file that won in court. The watch is on my wrist. My grandmother wore it for 40 years. Some things you don't negotiate. Know what those things are before someone else tries to decide for you.